Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. We almost have the full set spoilers for the first set of Zenkai series, so that means that the ban list is right around the corner. We are about 3 weeks out from the official set release, and that's right around the time that Bandai usually gives us the preset ban lists. If I had to guess, it's probably coming this Friday. I don't know that for a fact or anything, but just based off previous ban lists, I do think that we'll get the ban list by the end of this week. So today I want to go over my ban list, wish list, and predictions. Today we'll talk about many cards that you guys have been talking about in the Dragon Ball Super card game Facebook group, among other forums, and we'll talk about whether or not I think they should be hit and whether or not I think Bandai will hit them, because obviously those are two different things. So we'll get into that in today's video. If you guys are new here though, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video, and if you guys want to help support the channel, there are many ways to do so down in the description as always. But today, guys, if you want to step your game up, maybe consider checking out the Patreon down in the description. You guys can read the articles that I post there, and you guys can inquire about coaching if you want to step your game up for this national season. Anyways, let's get right into things, talking about the #1 card on everyone's radar, and that is Swift Retaliation Cooler. So me, myself, being a big yellow player, I probably have a lot to say about this. So should they hit Cooler? In my opinion, they should not hit Swift Retaliation Cooler because floodgates are so prevalent in the format. Typically, Bandai has not hit many, if any, defensive cards in the Dragon Ball Super card game, and typically that's been for good reason. The defensive cards are kind of necessary in a game where there's no summoning sickness. They are very helpful in kind of allowing mid-range and control decks to thrive, but Cooler is a very unique card because it is the only counter in the game that costs as little as this card does, even though costing 3 is a pretty fair amount in my opinion, but it can stop any counter in the game, which is very strong. The next most generic counter is of course Baby Golden Avenger, which in blue costs 5, but that's more fair in blue because blue has a lot of energy manipulation, right? And it's much more of a late game color. The way I view it is yellow and blue are the ultimate mid-range and control colors, but obviously yellow's in a special circumstance because they have Cooler that is the cheaper of the counters that can answer any counter in the game. I don't personally think they should go and hit Swift Retaliation Cooler because, again, the format is so floodgate based. The thing with Cooler is it's actually not all that good against red, not all that good against black, and not all that good against green. It's really only become a 3 of in most yellow decks because yellow and blue are so predominant in the format, and some decks are even going as far as siding a 4th copy because, again, these two colors are very stally, very defensive, and you just need the extra copies of Cooler to be able to deal with multiple floodgates and multiple turn-ending negates. If the format ever got more aggressive, like red became the best color, maybe red and green, or red and black became the best colors, Cooler would become no more than probably a 1 of in most yellow decks, just like it used to be back in the day. So kind of just explaining like why Cooler has gotten more popular, and yes, because people are playing more copies of Cooler in their decks, and it is a super powerful effect. Don't get me wrong, Cooler is insanely strong, but it's only becoming more popular in main decks because, again, the more stally controlling strategies are rising to the top of this format, and you kind of need Cooler to deal with those, in my opinion. If you hit Cooler, I think yellow as a color unfortunately becomes like rather weak. So should they hit it? My opinion, no. Will they hit it? I think they will, unfortunately, because typically a lot of ban lists have been based around what causes a lot of stir in the community, and Cooler is definitely the #1 offender when it comes to causing stir in the community at the current moment. Will they ban it? Maybe not. I could definitely see them going with a limit 1 approach because yellow has kind of just become the color of 1-ofs. A lot of people have also called for an errata to just take the drawing off of Cooler, and I'd be totally fine with that. I can see a world where Cooler doesn't draw. It doesn't have to draw cards on top of how powerful it is. I see why they added it because Bad Ring used to cost 1 but had a discard cost. They figured, well, now Swift Retaliation Cooler costs 3, so let's give it some draw power. That makes sense to me. But if they were to errata and remove the draws, I'd be totally fine with that. Honestly, if they're going to hit Cooler, I'd prefer that instead of limiting it to 1 or banning it outright. So do I think they should hit it? No. Do I think they will? I think there's a pretty decent likelihood, but I really hope they don't. Then we have Goku Absolute Annihilation, another very popular yellow card, another one that causes a lot of stir in the community. This card is very good against your control colors like blue and yellow once again, and even some random decks like Hachiak, which is pretty much the only black control deck. Yeah, this card is very good against those decks, and we are in a much slower format, so this card is becoming a bit more of an MVP. This is one that's been called for bans in previous formats where control and like long game mid-rangey decks have pretty much thrive because, again, this is one of the few cards that can kind of interact with those strategies. At this point in the game, we have infinite answers to aggro. We also have a great amount of answers to boss monsters, don't get me wrong, but What are we doing about like the floodgates and the super high value negates? I personally don't think there's that much. And sure, you could say yellow is the best color at dealing with negates because of Cooler and because of Goku Absolute Annihilation, but if that's yellow's niche in the meta, I'm okay with it. Again, I'm certainly biased because I really enjoy playing yellow, so maybe I don't have the most clear-minded approach to this, but I do think against a deck like Blue Baby or other really control-heavy decks, this is a fine card to have because, again, it's only limited to one color, and it's one of the very few ways to interact with all those types of cards that can almost infinitely stall a game. So, do I think they should hit Absolute Annihilation? No. Do I think they will? I really don't think they will because, again, it's a very niche card, and I don't think they're going to go and hit a card that doesn't see a ton of main deck play. Like, most Yellow Trunks decks play one copy, if any, and of course they sideboard it, but being a sideboardable answer, I think is fine. Also, Yellow pretty much has to commit their whole turn to playing this card. Like, most of the times this comes down on turn 3, and that's Yellow's entire turn, and this card's very answerable nowadays. There's plenty of barrier removal, there's more coming out in the first set of Zenkai series, so my opinion, this doesn't need to be hit, nor do I think they really will hit it. Then we have Bergamo Ferocious Roar. So should they hit this card, Bergamo's obviously already limited to 1 in the color that is pretty much the color of one-ofs. Should they hit Bergamo Ferocious Roar? I don't think they have to, but I think it would be okay if they did because we have the Goku Great Ape leader coming out in the Zenkai series starter deck. That leader taps something every single time it attacks, so at any point you draw Bergamo, it is much more usable in that deck than any other yellow deck. And to be honest, I think the only reason they didn't limit this card, or ban this card to 0, I should say, is because it got the winner stamp several sets ago as a championship promo. I think that's the only reason they didn't ban the card outright. Now that the card's been out for some time and the winner is kind of old, I think they might hit it. Again, I don't really have a problem if they do or don't. I think it's kind of neat for yellow to be the color of one-ofs because it just gives it a little bit of a different dynamic than all the rest of the colors. Will they? Again, I'm on the fence about it. I can see a world where they do, but I can also see a world where they just leave yellow as a color of one-ofs. So this one, I don't have a particular answer. If you have an answer or an opinion, definitely leave it down in the comments below for me. Poutine Dark Sorcerer. So if you notice, we're kind of going in color order, but this is pretty much a hit to yellow if they do. So even though it's a black card, we'll talk about it in regards to yellow. So should they hit Poutine the Dark Sorcerer? In my opinion, they should not hit this card because it is actually not very good right now. And yes, there have been plenty of formats where this card has been a little bit ridiculous, but I think the way they're printing decks right now, Poutine is getting a lot less value. Let me explain why. So there are many decks in the current format that can play a battle card by a skill as the first card played of their turn, and that card has barrier. As for a few examples, you have the Yellow Trunks deck, you have the GT Goku deck, and you have Gamma. Even U7 Goku can potentially bait out Poutine's effect by milling an Android 17 and putting that in play, or using a Gamasaurus to get an Android 17 in play, and you don't really care if the 1-drop gets rested, right? So all those meta decks are able to bypass the effect of Poutine, essentially making it a vanilla card in your opponent's board. You basically just played a 5k combo black card to your board that does nothing in those matchups. So a lot of players are starting to cut Poutine from their deck, rightfully so in my opinion. So the fact that Poutine is kind of just getting naturally power crept, I don't think they need to hit it. And do I think they will? I really don't think so. But again, this is actually one that's caused a lot of controversy in the community for quite some time. But back in the previous formats where people were talking about this card, it was maybe a little bit more warranted back then. Right now, for the reasons I just listed, most decks can bait it out very easily and not even feel affected by the card. I don't think they should, nor do I think they really will hit this card. Now we're moving on to blue, and this is the #1 card on my wish list, to be honest. That's Majin Buu, Assault of the Agents of Destruction. This card is the blue unison. When you're playing a blue deck, you don't really have a choice but to play this card. You might not play 4 copies unless you're playing a ramp deck, but your goal at some point in the game in a blue deck is to get Majin Buu, Assault of the Agents down onto the board. My opinion, this card's a bit overtuned. Yes, it is very well balanced in the sense that it has a +0 and not a +1. That was definitely a good job on Bandai's part, but I think this card's a little bit overtuned with all the defense it offers, and you know, just the ability that you can't really commit much energy into a non-barrier battle card because Buu is just going to remove it so effortlessly. That feels kind of bad. The added fact that it itself is a double strike threat, helping you clear your opponent's unisons. This card's very powerful. I think they should potentially ban it or limit it to 1. I know that a lot of people are not going to like that opinion, but I really think if you want to see diversity in blue unison options, I think you hit this card because there are a lot of good blue unisons, but they are all overshadowed by the fact that Majin Buu just exists, right? Do I think they will hit it? No, I don't, because Bandai does not have a track record of hitting defensive cards, and this, of course, can be very aggressive, but is inherently a defensive card. So I really don't think they will hit it. Do I think they should? Yeah. Do I think they will? No. Android 17, Turning the Tide. Another one that has actually kind of re-emerged in the ban list conversation. This is one we all talked about quite some time ago, and now it's kind of coming back into the limelight as a card that should potentially be hit. And we're actually getting a lot more ramp strategies in the first set of Zenkai series. So Android 17, Turning the Tide is always going to be a more interesting card when we're looking at blue ramp strategies. Should they hit this card? I used to be a really staunch opinion that yes, they should hit this card because it's really rather annoying. Like, it's got deflect, so you can't really stop its auto, but now we do have Jiren Survival of the Fittest, which essentially interacts with the auto, even though the card has deflect. So that answer does exist. I do like that. Every single long game deck has to basically play at least one copy of Jiren in their sideboard, but I think that's fine. Do I think they will hit it? I don't, nor do I really think they should, because we're seeing a lot of games go into overtime and a lot of people lose to time rules, and obviously it's a very frustrating thing, but we need battle cards like this that end the game at some point. And even this card that theoretically automatically ends the game on play has plenty of answers. The issue is you run into things like SS4 Vegeta that can play this card backed up by Baby Golden Avenger for 12 energy, and that gets pretty frustrating. But again, by 12 energy, the game should pretty much be wrapping up. My maybe also unpopular opinion, I'd like to see Fu Shrouded Mystery come back, because again, that's also a card that's not without answers, but it will help against the super stally control decks, which again are causing a lot of games to go to time. So that can kind of maybe alleviate some frustration by losing the time rules, but also it'll cause frustration because a lot of people don't like to lose that card because it turns off all your deck skills. Fun story, I once survived back-to-back turns of Fu Shrouded Mystery, so it's not impossible to survive it, and nor is it impossible to survive Turning the Tide. So I don't think they will hit it, nor do I really think they should, but this one might surprise us. This one I could see getting hit, although I don't think they totally will or should. Then we have Broly Crown of Retribution. So we're moving on to red here. So this card's kind of popping up on everyone's chopping block because of the new SS4 Gogeta deck. I mean, that deck just seems insanely strong in its own right, but that deck can play any red Saiyan for free. That costs 1. Broly Crown is an insane target for that ability. Playing this card, looking at your opponent's hand, removing anything 20k or less. I'm going to default a little bit to what I said about Cooler, where I really wouldn't advise hitting Answers to Floodgates when Floodgates are basically the format right now, but the thing that's different about Broly Crown is that you can use this card to pick your opponent's super combos out of their hand, maybe a key engine piece. This doesn't only hit Floodgates, this can hit vital parts to your opponent's strategy if they're leaving 2 energy open. So Broly Crown, a bit of a different situation. Do I think they should hit this card? My personal opinion, again, no, especially if blue is going to remain a very strong color in the upcoming format. I think that aggressive decks need a card like this to kind of have a shot against those types of decks. Will they hit it? I don't really think so. This is one that I just don't really see. It's not like that much of a role player in the current format. Maybe they preemptively hit it going into Zenkai, just kind of worrisome about how Gogeta might abuse it. I could see that, but I don't really think they will hit it. Then we have Goku the Supreme Warrior, the Universe 7 leader. Many players have been calling for an errata to this leader, mostly to the Awaken ability, where you can awaken at 8 life if you wanted to, because the deck is very aggressive. The deck plays very efficient threats and doesn't have to go to low life. The kind of agreed upon consensus for how aggro should be is you should kind of be punished for how efficient and how strong your cheap battle cards are by having to play a dangerous game at low life, and I pretty much agree with that. I don't think U7 is a purely aggressive deck. I do think it kind of teeters towards mid-range, but we all know that the red mid-rangey decks are inherently more aggressive than, like, let's say, the yellow or blue mid-rangey decks, which are inherently more control-y. They kind of teeter towards that line. So, yeah, I wouldn't mind if this leader saw an errata. Do I think they should? Yeah, probably. Again, like, I don't think aggro should be able to go super unchecked and play a super solid game if they want to. Will they? I don't think so. I don't think they'll do it. U7 just hasn't been putting up the results in this format, even though many players consider it to be one of the top decks in this format, one of the 3 in the triangle. But out of that triangle, Gamma Trunks and this, I mean, this has been putting up the least amount of results across the entire format. Some events, it's overly dominant, but some events it even misses top cut, so I personally don't think they're going to do it, in my opinion. Then we have Vadella Countering Danger. So this might be a card that's flying under some people's radars, but this card is actually absurd when you think about it. It didn't really see much play when it came out. That's mostly because there wasn't a good 3-cost unison to play with this card. But now we have Baby Juvenile Parasite, which is an absolutely absurd unison. I mean, it's Senzu Bean, it's removal, and it's a draw all in one card. I didn't really want to put that card here on the show because I think the card's too new to warrant a hit, although there is a slight universe where I see them hitting that card. But Vadella Encountering Danger, for how free it is, yes, it costs 1 marker off your unison, but during your opponent's turn, being able to snipe 2 of their battle cards and not having the same downsides that Yamcha has, where you have to use it in very specific counter windows, cards with deflect are not affected by Yamcha. Vadella is just outright better if you're playing a unison with a 3-cost or higher. I think Vadella might be a little bit too strong. If red is going to be the kind of faster, more aggressive color, should they really have this type of defense built into their deck if they're playing a 3 or higher unison? I personally don't think so. Will they hit it? Again, I don't really think they will hit it because it's a more defensive oriented card and they don't really have a track record of hitting more defensive cards. I think that Vadella is like perfectly answerable, I guess, but you have to play some really niche cards to kind of hit it. Like in the red mirror, sure, you have Vegeta Resolve Renewed, blue has Godsling Technique Trunks, but depending on the deck, it can be a little bit tough to deal with Vadella. So I can see this one going just because of how absurdly free and how much value it provides. Then we have Launch the Pure Hearted. So this is a preemptive hit that many people are calling for and assuming because of how Zenkai is going to work. So basically, the way it's assumed to work right now is that this launch will never have to end up in the warp because you can always just put it into the Zenkai as a game mechanic. And then, you know, once you use it as Zenkai energy, it'll go to your drop. Then you can combo from the drop again. So a lot of people are expecting this card to see some sort of errata. Should they do it? I think so. I think an infinitely recurable resource is kind of dumb, to be honest. And that's my biggest problem with the Bulma deck, to be honest. So I do think they should errata it. Do I think they will? I think there's a pretty good shot they do errata this card. Bandai doesn't seem to really care too much about erratas, even though many players consider them to be pretty messy. I don't mind them all that much because you got to go to the same place to find out the ban list as you do to find out about the errata list. So I don't really think it's all that much of a problem. Do I think they'll errata it? Yes. Do I think they should? Yes. Then we have Adele Miraculous Aid. Please, 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 Bandai, if you would ever grant me any wish, please ban this card. This thing is just absurd. I know Bulma, super niche deck, super rogue. A lot of you guys think I'm dumb for hating on the deck. It's just so obnoxious. If you ever played against a good player playing the deck, it just feels hopeless at times because they have this card that can, for some reason, add their Raditz super combos back to their hand. Listen to Danny's profiles here on the channel. He has super comboed upwards of 10 times in a vast majority of his games. Definitely not what the card was intended to do. Just get rid of it and let's just stop with the super stally strategies that don't really have anything to do offensively, to be honest. Then we have SS4 Goku Heartfelt Plea. This is a more interesting one to talk about because with Z Awaken, it's assumed that it's just a general awaken skill, so you can proc Heartfelt Plea. If that's the case, that takes away the downside of Heartfelt Plea being that one of that could sometimes end up dead in your hand, because if your leader or deck has a Z Awaken, now the Heartfelt Plea you draw way after using your regular Awaken is no longer a dead card. So does that mean they should hit Heartfelt Plea? I don't think so. I mean, I think it's one of the very few free play cards remaining, albeit red has the majority of the free play cards that remain. Like, they have Piccolo New Ruler, they have this. So should they just get rid of it outright? I don't think they should, nor do I think they need to. Do I think they will? I can see it. I can see this ban list maybe just being a big preemptive hit to things that might interact in a very powerful way with Zenkai. So I can see them doing it. I don't think it's 100% guarantee they will, but I definitely think it's highly likely in my opinion. No, but I don't think they need to. Then we're going to wrap this video up talking about Furthering Destruction Champa. So I've talked about this in a few videos, just kind of like in passing. I feel there's a pretty decent chance they're going to finally hit Furthering Destruction Champa and the Supreme Kai that also grants Double Strike, because there are so many leaders coming out that have their own built-in Double Strike win conditions, and I could see that being a method they use to kind of push the new set. You know, ban all the generic Double Strike granters, and now you have to play the new decks that have the Double Strike built in, right? Should they ban this card? I don't think it's a huge necessity, although I would personally like to see them go, only for the reason that if they were to ban these cards, It just means we don't have to put Champa or Kai in every single deck, and that would just be nice to see a main deck slot open up for every single deck. Although my teammate Jordan has a very good point every time we talk about this, and that games are going super long and very stally, which I've talked about many times in this video, and Champa is one of the few things that can actually help mitigate that. So for that reason, I think the card should stay, but again, for like the deck building thing and just every single card, including this card in their deck, I think it'd be nice to see that slot open up. Do I think they will hit it? I don't really think so. I think me just thinking they will because every leader is getting a built-in double strike. I think it's just me kind of connecting the dots where maybe they don't exist. But again, I could see a universe where it happens. So overall, guys, I mean, I guess going through my own thoughts on, you know, should they, will they? I don't think they're going to end up doing a lot except for maybe like the preemptive, like powerful Zenkai interaction stuff like Heartfelt Plea and Launch the Pure Heart. I think those are like the big ones on the list. I think Cooler unfortunately has a high likelihood of getting hits because of all the community discussion surrounding it, but other than that, I don't think much else is very dire. Again, I'd really like to see the Boo Unison be hit, but I don't think that's one that's really on the chopping block because again, it's a defensive card and typically defensive cards don't really get hit. But anyways, guys, let me know in the comments below what you think about these wish lists and predictions. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.